Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade, hunkered down and self-isolating in my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Yeah, that's right, there's no spring offensive this weekend. I expected to be around 2 tables with 12 people from across borders, but that did not happen, and that's very understandable that people did not travel here. I mean, they couldn't travel, the borders were closed, and even the people who could travel, it was a good idea not to. And we even talked about it with the guys that lived in town. We thought, you know what, let's just not do it. But, I'm just like all of you, I'm just itching to play my new game here. Global War 1936 to 1945 version 3. So I thought, you know what, why don't I just share some of the things that I've learned since my trip to Tulsa last year. I got to know the game a lot more, and the biggest reason is because I got to know the people a lot more who were building this game, who were making the rules and things like that. And I've been in contact with them a lot. Like I phone them, we exchange messages and emails and all kinds of things, right? And so I've learned quite a bit. One of the things I learned I'm going to share with you in this video, and that is all about Abyssinia, and this comes from across the Atlantic from my friend in Denmark. His name is Morton. So let's talk about the Ethiopian Empire. That it was an empire. Like this country here was Ethiopia, and it got bigger, it got smaller, and everything for 700 years, from the year 1270 until 1974. It was one of the more powerful nations in the Horn of Africa over here. It was the Solomonic dynasty, it was called. Anyway, so it lasted for over 700 years, but there was a lot of times people came after him, of course, as they do over hundreds of years like that. And what we're concerned about with is the Italians, right? So the first time the Italians attacked him was in 1896. That was the first Italian war. But the Italians lost that one, and the Ethiopians contained the Italians to Eritrea here. This is Eritrea, this territory over here. So anyway, that lasted until 1935, when Italy was starting to feel a lot braver because of their big brother to the north of them, the Germans, right? And the world was going to be at war, and so they thought, this would be a good time. They wanted to expand their colonies in Africa. Like Africa was a big place that was colonized by the Europeans, right? The British were there, the French were there, the Dutch were there, the Belgians were there, and the Italians were there. And with everybody being so busy everywhere else with this impending war coming, the Italians thought that this would be a good time to try and expand their holdings down there. So they went after somebody that was still their own nation, but were kind of aligned to the French, but like not really controlled too much by the French, right? And that would be Abyssinia. So that was in 1935. They attacked them the second time, and it was a horrible war. There was war crimes on both sides. Tear gas and just things that were banned from being in wars. Both sides engaged in that. It wasn't pretty, right? So that war lasted about 7 months, and the Italians took over Ethiopia here, and they wanted to also take over British Somaliland. They definitely wanted to expand, right? So they declared war on France and Great Britain because Italy was at the time being pounded by the Germans, right? Like the Blitzkrieg was rolling through France. So they thought this would be a great time to declare war on the two of them. And that way they could expand their holdings down here. They didn't have much designs on taking over Europe, right? That was the Germans. But they thought that they could expand their empire down here, the Italians. And it worked. They did manage to take over British Somaliland, but for whatever reasons, they had bad luck, or they fought badly, or whatever you want to say about the Italians, that they really didn't do very well in Africa in World War II, because in 1940 the British came and they took both of these places back, and Eritrea, and eventually North Africa was taken back by the Allies as well from the Italians. So the Italians were kicked off of the African continent, but for a second there they ruled the Ethiopian Empire, right? Anyway, but in 1962, Italy, or sorry, the Ethiopians annexed Eritrea here, and that didn't go over so well, because they're two different peoples, right? Two different cultures, and so that led to a civil war, and that civil war eventually led to the downfall of that 700-year-old empire. So be careful what you wish for, right? So in 1974, this empire ended. But you're wondering, why the hell am I watching this video? Who gives two shits about Abyssinia? And I used to think that too, like, who cares about Abyssinia? So why should you care about that when you're playing Global War 1936 to 1945? I'm going to tell you. It could actually mean the difference between winning and losing this game. In this game, in version 3, the Italians, their peacetime income is 10. In version 2, their peacetime income was only 7, but now it's been bumped to 10. So they can actually make quite a bit more money. When you add up that 3, 3, 3, 3 over the course of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 turns, right? Like Italy doesn't necessarily have to declare war in 1940, right? They can just sit there and build up. That makes a big difference, right? Like that's somewhere maybe 24 IPP, maybe up to 30, right? That Italians are making extra. So you're gonna have to knock them down some. You're gonna have to soak them up a bit, right? Down here, this is one way. Like the Italians want to take Abyssinia, right? So you could make it harder on them. So that's going to soak up the Italian units. That'll take away from the units that they're putting into Spain. Or if they decide to put in Spain and put units down into the war in Abyssinia, then that's going to take away from them building up their homeland, because they don't have a huge income, right? It's not like they can build Rome right up so that you could never take it. They have to build it slowly, right? And so anything that you can do to hold the Italians back is a good thing. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, let's just take you to the computer over here. So this is the Italian campaign in Abyssinia, and it looks like my battery's getting low, so we better hurry here. It's just a regular battle, as you know. It talks about it. So one of the things I always forget to do, though, is the recruitment roll, because the Abyssinians are controlled by the French. So on the French turn, you should be rolling the dice, or one die, sorry, like a D12, and trying to get a 1, because there's only one nation there. So if you get a 1, then the Abyssinians will get either 1 infantry or 2 militia. So that's one way that you can make it harder on the Italians. And then victory. So the Italians win if they possess Abyssinia. So once Italians take that spot, that's over. There's nothing more you can do. The Abyssinians win if they take Eritrea from the Italians. Now, resolution, it says Italian victory provides a victory point from Italy. That's, I think, at the end of the game if they own that space, because they would have to own. It doesn't say anything about winning that war for the victory point, but it does say if you own territory outside of Italy, then that's worth a point. But anyway, this is the key here. If the Abyssinia wins, then they align to France as soon as France is at war with a major power. If France is subsequently defeated, Abyssinia becomes free France. That's the key right there, is Abyssinia becomes free France. And before my computer dies, let me just go to something else here that I want to show you about Lend-Lease. Okay. Because there's a change made here, but it's not in the rules yet. In my it's 11.4. In my research here to do this video, it says overland zones delivery process. So here it says Lend-Lease must be moved across any number of land zones that you control. I spoke to Morton about that, and he said, "Oh no, that's a mistake. It shouldn't be that. It should just be like if somebody lets you use their territories, you should be able to use them. Like if the British allowed, say, France or Russia to use their railroads or their rivers, then you should be able to do that. It doesn't have to be a land zone that you control. So this is going to be changed by the time the rule book comes out. So that's something that you needed to know, otherwise that would have confused you. Now I can close my computer before it dies on me. Okay, so this is important. In my last video, I was showing you the 1939 setup because we played that last weekend, me and a couple friends of mine. And it was the first time I played the 39 setup, and I thought, this is a big advantage for the French because you can move the French units off of the French territories onto British territories before the Germans had a chance to take out Paris. Like the Germans could have taken Paris on the very first turn as soon as the game begins, but it didn't look like they were strong enough. It didn't look like the opening setups were strong enough. We didn't try it, but Panzer King was playing the Germans. He didn't try. He didn't go for it. He didn't think it looked like a very solid attack. So rather than do it then, he built up his units for a turn, and then he attacked Paris. But what that did on the first turn was it allowed the French to move off of French colonies and off of the French home country up there. So what that does, because when Paris falls, then you roll for all of the French colonies, like everywhere. They're all over the board, right? And whatever's on those colonies becomes either Free French or Vichy French. Now, if you knew what they were going to be, like if you knew that this was going to be Free French, then you could just pile all your units on there. If you don't, then you're not going to have a lot left for the French to use after the fall of Paris, because all of those units in the home country will be gone. Most of your ships will be gone. You're going to roll for those as well. I mean, you could be lucky and get a few of those, but just about all of your land units are going to be gone. The only land units you will have left are land units that happen to roll Free French, like this. If you rolled Free French, then that guy would be saved. Syria, if you rolled Free French, then that would be saved. But there's no guarantee of that, right? And those aren't much. There's just 2 units there, right? Like there's really not much. There will be more by the time by the time the war begins, by the time Paris falls, but not much, right? So how do you find a place where you can guarantee that you're not going to lose all those units? Well, here you have it in Eritrea, because like I was saying with the rules there, this goes Free French. It doesn't go into the pool where it gets rolled to be Vichy or Free French. It goes Free French. So you know that. Now, you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. You could soak up units from the Italians, and you could have a landing spot to put French units on. Now, bear in mind, this is going to take away from the units that you put in France, because you're going to need to be land leasing them from France down to Abyssinia, right? So that's going to be a thing for you. But like you have to decide. Okay, so what's better, right? And it's the same. When you're deciding and when you're playing France, like it's a question, like I've always had that question in my mind when I was playing the Allies: how much stuff should I move out of the French home country, and where should I put it to gamble on whether or not I have some stuff left to play the rest of the game? So it's the same thing. You are taking a gamble, but if you can hold on to Abyssinia and put Lend-Lease stuff there, then all of that stuff becomes French, and you will have a home base to start in, and you can make anything your capital, any French colony your capital after that. It doesn't have to be those 3 ones that were in version 2, like it was London or Algeria or Belgian Congo. Like you could make any French colony your capital. So you might be able to get a bunch of stuff here if you're successful. And the key lies in the very first turn, right? Because there's enough guys here to take it out. Now, I used to use these guys too, but I was playing it wrong. Like I used to use the planes here that are in North Africa in the battle down here in Abyssinia, but you can't do that. I didn't realize it, but you can't do that. Like I can't see in the rule book where you can't fly over the desert. So you could, like if you were to fly straight there, you could still land in Eritrea, right? But you can't do it because you're not allowed to fly over British territory. If you were at war with Great Britain, you could fly over them. If Britain had a fighter there, then you would have to fight that fighter and then move on. But because you're not at war with Britain, because they are neutral to you, you're not allowed to fly over their territory. It's kind of like Axis and Allies, where you couldn't fly over a strict neutral. It's the same idea, right? And now if you try to go around, so 1, 2, and then 3 into Eritrea, and 4, you could reach there. You could reach there, but then you've used up all your movement points. You can't fly, you couldn't fly here. If you had long range aircraft, you could, but you're not going to have long range aircraft in 1936, right? So there's no way of bringing those other 2 planes into it. Basically, all the Italians have is these 3 dudes, a cavalry and 1 fighter to attack Abyssinia, and Abyssinia is a mountain territory. So before the Italians are just about last, right? They go after the Americans do. Now, there's a couple ways you could play this. So we first explored about going through this minor naval base down here in what is this? Oh, French Somaliland. Okay, so you can lend lease through there definitely, because there is a railway here. So you could lend lease down through from France. You could lend lease through the canal and down here and into here, because France is not at war with Italy. There's no way to interdict that. Even though they're at war with the Abyssinians, they'd have to be at war with the French in order to stop those supplies from coming down, because it's from the sending nation that you have to be at war with, right? So the Italians can't stop that, unless that's a good way to get them to suck them into declaring war on you. You would really love to get Italy in the war early in the game. It gives you a juicy target to attack, and it opens up the south down there. Be able to get rid of those boats. Those boats are a big threat to you down there, and you don't know what they're going to do, right? Like they could strike at any time or never. It makes you it makes you commit your resources somewhere where you not necessarily want to. Anyway, so you could lend lease a French unit down here, but only up to $3 worth, because you can only lend 3 IPP through this minor port, or a unit worth up to 3 IPP. So the only thing you could do for France is lend lease this guy in here, and then you could also do your recruitment roll. That's you'd be pretty lucky to get that, though, wouldn't you? So the most you could have is either 4, I'd say probably 2 militia. So if you put 2 militia on, you could have 4 militia and this dude. Now that might stop them, because you got to remember, this guy, all 3 of these dudes here are going to only attack at 1. The cavalry is going to attack at 2, because it's a mountain territory. The plane, though, is going to attack at 6, right? So that's going to be a tough one. Now, there's more than that, though. What if you talk to the Russians before the game started? Say, hey, why don't you help us out here? Like, you could make some kind of deal with them. Like, if you lend lease just 1 unit, like on the first turn, because it's that first turn that you really need to stop them, right? After that, you can start building up more and more. So if they lend leased a unit on the very first turn, then you could probably hang on to that, because this is a pretty dicey attack right here. The Italians might still win it, but if you were to put another dude on there, that changes the story now, doesn't it? So let me grab a chip here. So if the French lend lease, like, you could make a deal like, okay, you lend us a dude and we will build a tank for you for the Americans, when the Americans are able to lend lease. Like, they can't lend lease at the beginning of the game. They have to be at the threshold of 15 IPP income, and then they can lend lease. And so then you could that would pay off for the Russians, and it would pay off for the Allies as well, because that keeps the Italians busy, right? So you could look like this now: 4 dudes against 4 dudes in a fighter. And these dudes are much more powerful because these guys are going to defend at 4. These guys are going to defend at 2. And these guys are only attacking at 1. This guy's attacking at 2. You could even get more than that. And what you could do is on the British turn, like, it's kind of funny, but you look here, the railway doesn't go into here. The railway comes in from French Somaliland. That's the only reason you could lend lease through there. But the railway doesn't go into Abyssinia over on this side. And the rivers, for some reason, the rivers stop at the border. I'm not sure what that's all about, but they don't go into there. So what you could do is on the first turn, you could build a railway by the British. Now they go before the French, but not before the Russians. So you could put a dude in here for the Russians, right? And then put a railway on for the British, and then you could put, like, say, a mountain infantry on, because the mountain infantry is 4. You couldn't bring them through this minor naval port, but you could bring them down this railway, right? So he could enter this port up here, which is a major port, down through the railway here, and you've got a railway connection. But the problem with that is that it would cost money, right? Because you're building a railway into a mountain. And so that's probably going too far. That's probably spending too much money for the Allies to do that. But you might consider that on the second or third turn, so that the French could send down some better units, right? Like they could send down maybe some fighter, like a fighter, or some light tanks or anything, right? Like anything would be better than just being able to lend lease dudes. But let's just say that you didn't do that, because it is, I think it's what is it, $8 to build into a mountain. I can't remember, but it's a lot. But anyway, I think that you could do wonders just going like that. And then the Italians, they might not even attack, right? They might just think, okay, well, that's just a losing proposition. So they might instead, like, they don't start with a transport, right? So now they've got to build a transport. They can fly their planes down here. So on the third turn, so first turn they build a transport. Okay, second turn they bring their dudes down to here. Third turn, then they're able to come in here. So then they've got 2 more ground units to come in here with. Like they could bring mountain infantry so that their infantry could at least attack it too, right? Or they could bring a light tank that could attack at 4 or whatever. But by then you'd be able to put down another 2 French units, right? So you would be looking at 4 French infantry and 2 militia, and possibly at that point with 3 recruitment rolls under your belt, you might have gotten one of those. Maybe you're lucky and got 2 of them. Like you might be able to hold on to this territory. I'm not saying you can, I'm not saying you can't, but isn't that interesting though, that you could do that? And then if you were able to defeat these guys, I think that you're probably still better off. Well, maybe you could take a shot at these guys up here, and I'm not sure that you could still lend lease to them. Like, I wouldn't take them out just yet. I would continue to lend lease down here and then take them out to end the war, or just not bother. Like if the Italians can't take you, then they can't take you. Too bad, so sad for them, right? You could just keep holding on to that. Just keep putting in units, like lend lease the little French tank down here, lend lease the fighter down here. That's if you can get down the railway here. If you do the railway right, like you could have all kinds of stuff in here by the time Paris fell, right? And then magically this becomes free France here, and then you've got a pocket of French units down here. So just think how well this would help out the British in Africa, with the Italians having that extended income in this game over and above what they had in V2, right? That would certainly help out down here. Like these guys here could wipe out the Italians that are down here to begin with, and then when France falls, then the British and the French have a solid hold on this end of Africa here. They could mop up these guys, and hopefully weather anything that's coming down from Italy, because Italy, like they do have that extra money, and they can put it into doing that, but they are going to have to declare war, and that's what you want. More than anything, that's what you want, is for the Italians to have to declare war. So, like I said, if you start putting stuff down here, they might see that and go, well, geez, I can't let that go. I'm going to have to declare war early, earlier than I thought, like 1939 or something, just in order to stop all this from happening, right? Because then they can at least blockade it, right? But then, like they're going to have to make sure they get through that canal first, aren't they, with their units? See, it's tough on the Italians. If you can do this, it's tough on the Italians, right? There's just no two ways about it. You can throw a monkey wrench at them. Anyway, so I thought I'd share that little tidbit with you. It's something that you can try anyway, right? It's just another thing that you can try. I don't know that it's the linchpin for what you need to win the game, but it can certainly turn the tide down here, right? Down in this area down here, and the Mediterranean as well, because there's a few points at stake here, and there's bonuses that are at stake, with owning canals and with owning the Mediterranean. Like if the Italians can get everything out of the Mediterranean, they get bonus money. So there are bonuses to be had down here, and there is points at the end of the game to be had down here. So you can't discount this area down here, and this will go a long ways into doing that. But you need a bit of luck, I think. I can't say for sure that you'd be able to hold it on that first turn, but if you could, wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, that's just my little tip for the day. Thanks to my friend from across the pond for sharing that one with me. I can't wait to try it in a game myself. I was going to try this. I was the Allies in the spring offensive, and I had already talked to the the Russian player, and we were going to go ahead with that. He was going to help me out and everything. But such is life. It didn't happen, but it will happen at some point in the future. So anyway, maybe you can try that in your games. Let me know how it works out in the comments of this video if you do try it. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.